the tweets a few weeks ago. What message were you trying to get out?
Well, social media is a little bit of the Wild West, and sometimes what happens to all of us is we get caught up in the heat of the debate. And so what happened was I've been sort of following this Parkland issue from a distance because I haven't written much about the gun issue. It's not really my main issue, but I was sort of getting frustrated at the way that the students in Parkland seem to be becoming or being made pawns of a political agenda. And so I saw, for example, an interview in which one of the students was, kept stopping and starting and was being literally coached by the TV interviewer or the producer and told what to say. And so against that backdrop, I then see a meme on social media in which the students have been trotted down to the Florida legislature for their vote on gun bans. And the Florida legislature voted down, and the meme was registering the student disgust and reaction to that. So, in the heat of the moment, I said, I wrote the tweet, I wrote the infamous tweet, and you can read it so you know what it says. But it was, my arrow was wrongly aimed because I was trying to aim at the media manipulation of it. That's what I was emotionally responding to. But I ended up, firing an arrow at the students. And so initially I just put it out, but when I saw the reaction, I went, wait a minute, and one of the students even wrote and said, Dinesh, my best friend was shot. And so I felt terrible, and I realized that the tweet fairly read was insensitive, and so I apologized and in fact took it back. This happened on the verge of CPAC. I think CPAC started getting a bunch of calls, and the guys at CPAC are thinking, we don't want to be debating Dinesh's tweet when we have our own slate of speakers and we want the focus to be on CPAC. So, there's no repudiation of me by CPAC. All that CPAC said is, listen, this is an old speaker bio from Dinesh's earlier talks at CPAC, and we'll take it down, not because I'm banned at CPAC, but because this is not our current list, and we don't want to be focusing on a non-speaker this year when we want the attention to be on our program. Okay. So there's been that single episode is sometimes cited as some sort of repudiation of me, but there's no repudiation. The left has been trying to get a repudiation. In fact, they've been calling a lot of people who are sponsoring speeches by me to try to get them to denounce me or cancel the speech, and none of that has occurred. So it's a sort of a failed attempt to take the tweet beyond the tweet itself, even though I've already expressed my regret over it.
Let's talk about the phrase you used, the intolerant tolerance. Explain what you mean by intolerant tolerance.
Well, the concept of intolerant tolerance is simply to invoke tolerance to justify the most mean-spirited intolerance. So, in other words, it's a very dirty game. The people on the left declare we're the party of tolerance. Therefore, we get to identify all these intolerant people who don't agree with us and exhibit intolerance toward them. And that's what's going on, is that there's an effort to shut down not just free speech, but you also get the sense that there is a kind of hostility now to to several of the amendments of the Bill of Rights. I just saw something on social media today where someone was saying, the Bill of Rights is an outdated document and needs to be updated. Now, first of all, there is a provision to update the Bill of Rights, in the Constitution. It's called the amendment process. But if you make statements like the safety of kids comes ahead of an outdated document, which is one of the phrases I saw today, the safety of kids comes ahead of an outdated document, that's not just a rationale for getting rid of the Second Amendment. It's a rationale for getting rid of the First, the Second, the Fourth, and the Fifth Amendments. Because think about it this way. If the safety of kids comes first, why shouldn't cops be able to do unreasonable searches and seizures of homes and vehicles without a warrant? The safety of kids comes first. Who cares about the Fourth Amendment? So, we're seeing here a kind of attack that is on the Bill of Rights itself, on some of our most fundamental liberties. And we've seen it more commonly now on the Second Amendment. But the people who don't like the Second Amendment aren't so hot about the First Amendment either.
Your thoughts on the Trump administration? What's been happening over the past couple of weeks and months?
Well, Trump has turned out not only to be an outsider president, but to make a kind of bold challenge to the old Republican way of doing things. And I mean not just Republican strategy, but also now with the issue of trade and tariffs, to some degree with, you can call it Milton Friedman dogma. The Republican Party has been really, for example, a kind of, you may say almost insistently free trade party. And free trade for Republicans has meant that it doesn't matter if somebody else puts tariffs, we shouldn't follow suit and put tariffs also. Now, what Trump is doing most recently is he's making a very interesting counter-argument, which is he's basically saying, look, if some other guy has tariffs, what is the best, if not the only way to get that guy to take them down? How can we convince the other guy to take his tariffs down if we don't threaten to put tariffs on him? So what Trump is basically saying is not obviously a repudiation of free trade, because Trump isn't saying at the end of the day, I want to see a trade war. But what Trump is basically saying is that the best way to get to a kind of bilateral or multilateral free trade is to use political leverage, including the threat of political retaliation against the other guy. Now, that issue, I think, needs to be debated. I'm frankly not convinced. I've been a free trade guy all my life. I'm a product of, William F. Buckley, Milton Friedman conservatism, but neither do I write off the Trump, critique. And so I think this is actually for Republicans, for conservatives, an opportunity to open up the debate on that Reaganite conservatism that has dominated the party for 30 years. And Trump also makes, this is an interesting argument for the left to consider, because the left has by and large been in favor of tariffs. So it'd be interesting to see how they respond to a guy that they consider to be the second cousin of Lucifer himself, now advancing an argument that they've been making.
In Hillary's America, it appears to me that you, and correct me if I'm wrong, you use your experience of when you were charged and convicted and served time to kind of educate people on what you learned.
The story of Hillary's America is essentially that prior to my incarceration in a halfway house for 8 months overnight, prior to that, I tended to look at American politics as a sort of intellectual debate between two sides with sort of rival philosophical principles. But after this experience with the Obama administration, I began to realize that politics has a much grittier side that I had missed. And that is, politics is also driven by very primal human motives of just greed and lust and revenge, retaliation, hatred, those kinds of motives, which we tend not to focus on, or we tend to sort of submerge. And yet, those are driving motives in American politics. So, in my own case, for example, the Congressional Oversight Committee now has a copy of my case file. Some of it is redacted, but looking into it, right there, it says that, Dinesh D'Souza, this man is a prominent critic of the Obama administration. Now, that's not supposed to be in my case file. If I exceeded the campaign finance law, I should be like any other guy who exceeded the campaign finance law, and I should receive the same treatment, the same penalty as any other guy. But no, I'm immediately flagged as a prominent conservative and an opponent of Obama, and my file moves to the front and is given in all kinds of ways I could go into, but probably don't need to now, sort of special attention, you might say. So right away I see that this politics is not a matter of debate. It's a dirty game, and, you know, very petty narcissistic people use the weapons of the government at their disposal against their political opponents, and that's the America we live in now. Now, Trump knows that. That was not Reagan's America. And that this is part of the reason why I've been a pretty strong Trump supporter, at least since he got the nomination. And that's because I think he almost alone recognizes the kind of new terrain on which the political battle is being fought.
You're coming out to Idaho here in a few weeks. What's going to be your message?
My message is going to surf right on the wave of current events. But it's also going to step back at the same time. It's going to interpret the significance of Trump. It's going to talk about the state of modern American conservatism. And it's going to show a path forward for Republican activists. What do we need to do, and how can we make a difference?
All right. Anything you want to add?
Let's see. Well, I have a big movie coming out this summer in August, and so I just got back from Europe, where we've been shooting a lot of it, and then now we're moving into the editing process. So
what's it called and what's it about?
The movie is called Death of a Nation, and it's a play on the infamous Birth of a Nation movie, which came out the very beginning, one of the first prominent movies in Hollywood, came out a century or so ago. The theme of the movie is essentially what is the real threat facing the country, and how do we save America yet again?